All right, we are here with Jena Paquette. She is an awesome agent with Boss Realty Group. We're going to discuss a little bit about getting your house ready to list, um, and maybe just about real estate. Anyway, Jena, how long have you been an agent?
I have been an agent for 4 years, going into year five. I love it. It's been awesome so far. Obviously, it's a really fun time to be in real estate. But also there comes the battles of being on the buyer's end where it's not so fun right now either. So
Right.
it's that
Yeah,
give and take, but
it's
yeah.
pretty competitive for buyers right now, for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so what made you want to get into real estate?
I always loved real estate since I was younger and just always had a kind of piece of my heart was in it to begin with. I took my classes when I was 18 when I moved down to Eau Claire, but that was 2006, 2007 time.
Okay,
And so I got done with my classes. I was like, what am I going to do with this when the market's crashing? So I decided not to pursue it at that time. And then it always had been in my mind still.
sure.
And then I just decided that it was the right time and to take the jump for it finally. And so glad I did. I mean, I love it 100%.
Awesome. Awesome. So when somebody wants to list their house, they always have questions like what is acceptable as far as, what their house should look like as cleanliness wise, and if they should try to declutter. What are your
Yeah.
recommendations?
Recommendations. Less is more, people. Less is more. I always try to say, you got to take yourself out of living at the home, which I totally understand is very hard, but try to put yourself in the buyer's shoe and try to remember like what it's like to be the buyer. So obviously less is more. Cleanliness is huge. People work off their senses. So if somebody walks in and there's something throwing them off or a weird smell, I know it's so silly. And in a hot seller's market, it's not as top of the list, but still very important. You want to put your best foot forward, especially too with the pictures. Like people are going to see that in pictures, and that's what gets people to your house. Like having good pictures without a lot of distraction so people can see the property is huge.
For sure. So with that, I mean, obviously I know you and we work with the same people. Professional photography is definitely a recommended thing.
Yes, always. In my mind, always.
Yeah. People out, like you're a homeowner, you always have like an unfinished project. Depending on what it is, of course, like how important is it to get those projects done before they list the house?
Right.
Like a painting or trim work or stuff like that.
Again, in the hot sellers market, it's hard to tell people like this is very important when
Sure.
there's so much traction to begin with. But I do feel like it's important to put those pieces together. With paint, I think paint can change a room altogether. So again, going back to the feeling and the vibes of it, I think the more modern you have things, the better, just because it's going to attract the most attention. Always going back to people see those pictures, and if it gives them a cool, like, I can move in and not have to do a thing, you're going to get more traction.
Paint's another good way to help with the senses as far as like the smell or something like that.
Right.
If you're going into a house like, oh, it's freshly painted, it's kind
Right.
of a nice thing.
Yeah. Like, do you have little kids? Are there fingerprints on the walls? Again, not that it's like make or break, you can't list your house unless you do it, but
Right.
it's a good suggestion for people to like take themselves out, look at it as a buyer, and okay, I would like to come in a house that's freshly painted and cleaned and feels good. Like you want to give people that good feeling when they walk in that house.
That could be it could be difficult for some sellers that have pets. I know
Yeah.
that, because if the seller may not notice it so much because they
Right.
live there, but then somebody comes in and they can smell cat or dog or something like that. It could be
Yeah.
very difficult
Yes.
to get past
Yeah.
that. So yeah, that's good point to say you're selling with your senses.
Yeah. I always tell people that. I mean, it's just I think it kind of clicks with a lot of people. Like,
Hmm.
oh, like it is true. Like if something smells funny or something doesn't feel right, well, you're gonna trust that, right? I mean, as
Right.
humans, generally we trust those instincts.
Right. For sure. Yeah, that's very, very good point. Is there a point where you could like over uh, like air fresheners and stuff? If you,
Oh yeah,
like, I'm sure you've walked into a house and all you smell is a chemical flower plant
yeah,
going on, and it's just like, wait a minute, what are they trying to? You almost do a point like, what are they trying to cover up?
yeah,
You know?
100%. I've walked in places and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, nice try, but not today, you know? And sometimes they're just doing it because, you know, people are doing it just to be nice, but there's
Yeah,
that difference where you can sometimes tell where they're trying to hide something. And yeah,
yeah.
I
I
fresh
think
air is good.
the best thing is just to do a really good clean, and it's awesome.
Speaking of that,
um, Clean and paint that does a, and like
yes,
shampooing the carpets if there are carpets, like doing that
yep,
kind of stuff
yeah,
is really
definitely.
helpful.
Yeah, and this time of year too, like start to think about the curb appeal. Again, when people pull up, like what they see is gonna affect how they feel about the property. So if it's cluttered outside, if it's dirty, they're gonna be like, "Oh, great! Like, what's the inside gonna be like?" Or, you know, too, like when it is cluttered or dirty, do these people really take care of this place? Like, do I want a home where it looks like people haven't taken care of it?
Right. Yeah, you can always go back to the people like a well-maintained home
Right.
because it's a big
Hmm.
investment for people. So they don't,
Yeah,
if it hasn't been
absolutely.
cared for, yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. So with that exterior work, I mean, we're getting coming into spring now, making sure things are trimmed up and cleaned up, I guess, would be making sure no debris in the yard,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on for sellers getting property ready?
Another thing too, I like to really hit it home with what loans are we trying to target? Obviously, you want to
Right.
target all of them. You want to bring the most competition.
Yep.
So, giving that piece of knowledge of, you know, what appraisers look for or what could be an issue when it comes to appraisal time or approving the loan for the property. So obviously, like the big ones are for FHA, USDA, VA loans, peeling paint,
Yep.
carbon smoke detectors. Um, I mean, those are the two big ones, and then railings. They can. There's other things that they can point out to, but those are the main big ones. So we want to just
Yep.
button that up right away and not even have to deal with it later, because the more traction, obviously, the better.
For sure. Yeah, that brings in more potential buyers, especially if it's a, if you have an older deck outside or something like that,
Right.
or even I've seen like fencing get called out before, like
Oh yeah.
making sure that at least there's no obvious peeling paint, and if there is, just put a fresh coat on it. It will
Right.
save so much time later down the road.
Yep, and stress. I mean, at the end of the day, that little stuff can get really stressful for sellers. So if we discuss that and we go over that
Yep.
and we address it right away, it's just easier to have it done. And two, I just like to put that knowledge out there. So, you know, like I'm here to give you my knowledge and use it how you want it. But, you know, there are reasons why to use an agent just to cover yourself to be less stressful during the process.
Right. Another thing would be those like any outlet covers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many electrical junction boxes we see
Oh my
that,
gosh, DIYers with
yeah,
electrical, why not?
like put a cover, just cover it, just put a cover on
Yeah,
it. That's because the appraiser's gonna call it out. It
yeah,
will
yeah,
happen.
yeah. So anything, obviously, then health and safety too. That's with
Yep.
any loan. If there's an appraiser that calls out anything, the obvious stuff like electrical,
Yep.
like concerns about moisture in the building, you know, stuff like that. It's good to just at least have knowledge and please address it beforehand.
Address it before, right? Because then, yeah, it just saves so much time down the road.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And that can get super stressful for you as a seller and the buyers too, you know. Nobody
Right.
wants to deal with that in the middle of it, especially when it's spring and summertime and there's a lot of activity going on. It's easier to keep everything smooth.
And a lot of people don't realize, a lot of times we're not waiting on, but the appraisals can take 3-4 weeks to
Yes.
come through. So you're that far into the transaction, and then they come and say, hey, you need smoke alarms or whatever. Okay, so you have to do that. And then they have to come back out and double check.
Right. Yep. It's not.
Which is going to cost the buyer
Mhm.
or the seller, depending on what it is, but it's going to cost everybody more time and money.
Yep. Yeah. For something so, again, going back to that, it's so simple, it's so little that those things like are way easier to address right away than to sit and wait and like, oh, well, maybe they'll call it out. Well,
Right.
if it's not a conventional or cash loan, they're most likely at this point, appraisers have been pretty strict on calling all this stuff out.
Yeah.
I mean, it is their job. We can't get mad at them.
No, if it's a safety issue, and smoke alarms is a safety thing, junction box covers is a safety thing, peeling paint, is a thing.
Yep.
So, and those are things that we know about, and so we could try to address everything ahead of time. So that's really good.
Yeah, knowledge is power. So, I mean, we're here to give people the knowledge of our industry and then take it from there.
Right. So of course, we know the inventory is super low right now. Would you agree that there's a large amount of buyers out there looking for just a couple of properties?
Well, there's so many buyers out there and not so many houses right now, especially in this area. We've seen an influx of interest and a decrease of inventory. There just isn't enough homes to supply who are coming this way, obviously driving up prices. So as hard as it is to be a buyer, it's a great time to be a seller in this area. And it doesn't hurt to give us a call. Our time is free to you. I mean, we don't get paid until we get to the closing table, and we're not trying to squeeze $1 out of you to come to your house and tell you what your house is worth. That's free, and knowledge is power, and maybe it is the right time.
Absolutely. I think, for any homeowner, their home is one of their biggest investments. So it's kind of good to know, even if you're not going to sell, but it's just good to know, hey, do I have like an extra 50 grand in equity sitting here? Maybe I should refi, or something. And maybe they don't do anything, but they just know that their home is appreciating well in value. And that's just, I think, a good feeling for all homeowners.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a better feeling than knowing like you bought something for less than what it's worth now.
Right. And then you can make that decision whether or not, hey, maybe I live in town now and I have a bunch of equity, but maybe ultimately I want to end up in the country, or on a lake or something like that. So, you can kind of figure out when you can make that next move.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts for the sellers who their kind of reason for not selling is because they don't know where their next move is going to be?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hard one right now.
I know that's a tough one.
It stinks. It really, really, really stinks. So price is a big thing. That's one thing that I explain to people when we have to sell your home too in this market. You might have to be a little bit more competitive with your price and be okay and comfortable doing so.
Yep. I've had that happen. That last year, we didn't have their home listed yet, but they were ready to go like at a drop of a hat.
Right.
And we got an accepted offer on a place. So we got it accepted. I'm like, we're listing it like tomorrow.
Right.
Give us 3 days before you bump us out, before just 3 days. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
And the sellers of that property did. They accepted our offer, gave us a 3-day window. We were able to get their house listed and an accepted offer on it within like a day.
Oh, that's awesome. Right.
So, but it can be very stressful.
It's stressful. Yeah.
For the sellers, the buyers, all over the place.
Yep. And that's a thing, like going into it, I like to try to tell sellers every angle that I can think of, because then at least we discussed it. You thought about it. I mean, we do this every day. So there's things that we think about or want to talk to you about that maybe you would never think about. And it's valuable to know your options.
Yeah, for sure. Options, the more options that you can present, I think the better. You know, I've even seen it where, you know, a seller accepts an offer like contingent upon them finding a
Oh, yeah.
place, you
Yeah.
know, so that's as long as the person buying doesn't necessarily have to, you know, move in quickly, you know, there are lots of options out there for sellers.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of some of them aren't as ideal.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I don't want to rent. I know that. I get that.
Right.
Sometimes it's worth it though, at the end of the day.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.